Connell didn't even flinch when Esther walked into the bedroom. He stood there like the room belonged to him, one hand resting on Vanessa's pregnant belly, the other still wearing his wedding ring like a joke. Vanessa leaned into him with a slow, satisfied smile, her red dress clinging to the curve that screamed the truth before anyone spoke it. The warm bedside lamp made everything look soft, but nothing about this was soft. This was betrayal wearing perfume. Esther's chest didn't rise the way it should. It tightened, quietly, like a door locking from the inside. Her eyes swept the scene once. Connell's calm face, Vanessa's confidence, the bedsheets slightly rumpled like evidence. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She just asked almost politely, "Vanessa, what is this?" Vanessa's smile widened. Not shame. Not fear. Victory. "Don't shout, Esther," she said gently, like she was the wife. "You'll raise your BP." Connell exhaled through his nose, annoyed, not guilty, as if Esther had interrupted something normal. And that was the moment Esther understood. This had been rehearsed. Planned. Enjoyed. How long? Esther whispered. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Esther's flat stomach, the place years of prayers had failed to fill. Then back up, cruel and calm. "Long enough," she said. "Long enough to give him what you couldn't." Esther swallowed hard. Her hands trembled once, then went still. And then Vanessa did the unforgivable. She turned to Connell, tightened her grip on his shirt like she owned him, and ordered him, right in front of Esther, "Tell her you're choosing me. Tell her to leave this house." Connell hesitated, just one breath. Then he opened his mouth. "If you've ever been betrayed by the people you fed, protected, and loved, stay with me, because what Esther does next will shock you. Like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Because the wildest part of the story begins now." Esther had learned early that being strong often meant being quiet. When her father died suddenly, it was her name that replaced his own responsibility, not because anyone asked her, but because everyone assumed she would carry it. School fees appeared on her shoulders. Hospital bills followed. When food ran low, she found a way. When relatives argued, she became the calm voice. By the time she married Connell, endurance already lived in her bones. She wasn't loud. She wasn't demanding. She believed love was proven by staying, by praying harder, by adjusting yourself so others could breathe comfortably around you. People admired Esther in that gentle, distant way reserved for women who never make trouble. Church women called her a virtuous wife. Friends said Connell was lucky. Connell himself liked introducing her as my peaceful wife, as though peace was something she produced on command. And Esther accepted that role because she believed peace was power. She believed if she loved well enough, forgave quickly enough, stayed soft enough, life would eventually reward her with balance. But life didn't reward her. It tested her. The miscarriages came quietly, one after the other, each one stealing something invisible. Esther learned how to smile through baby showers, how to clap when names were announced, how to hold other women's children while feeling a hollow ache she never named out loud. Connell prayed with her at first, held her hand during hospital visits, whispered scriptures at night. Then slowly, his concern thinned. He stopped asking how she felt. He started avoiding the topic altogether, as if silence could erase disappointment. Esther adjusted. She always did. She worked longer hours. She volunteered more at church. She convinced herself that fulfillment could be borrowed from everywhere else. She told herself marriage was bigger than children. She told herself love didn't always look the way you wanted. And each time doubt knocked, she pushed it away with gratitude. Connell didn't beat her. Connell provided. Connell came home most nights. That had to count for something. When Vanessa needed help, Esther didn't hesitate. Her younger sister had always felt like her responsibility, too. Vanessa had grown up watching Esther sacrifice, watching her give, without counting the cost. So, when Vanessa arrived in Lagos with one suitcase and ambition in her eyes, Esther welcomed her without fear. Family was family. Blood was blood. She didn't consider that generosity, when repeated without boundaries, teaches people how to take. Vanessa moved through the house easily, quickly learning its rhythms. Esther noticed the small shifts but refused to name them. Connell coming home later. Conversation stopping when she entered a room. A distance she couldn't measure but could feel. When instinct whispered that something was wrong, Esther silenced it with prayer. She told herself she would never be the kind of woman who accused without proof, the kind who destroyed peace with imagination. So she stayed quiet. And in that quiet, she observed. She noticed Connell's finances becoming vague. She noticed money moving strangely. She noticed how Vanessa asked questions that felt too specific. Esther didn't confront. She didn't cry. She didn't warn anyone. Instead, she did what quiet women do when survival instincts finally wake up. She started paying attention. Not emotionally, but strategically. She checked documents she'd never bothered with before. She reread emails she'd once skimmed. She remembered things she'd financed, things she'd signed, things she'd sacrificed that others had forgotten. Weeks passed. Esther said nothing. Her silence wasn't surrender anymore. It was restraint. By the time she walked into that bedroom and saw the truth standing in front of her, pregnant, bold, unashamed, Esther wasn't discovering betrayal for the first time. She was confirming it, and as her heart cracked in places she didn't know were still fragile, another part of her hardened with clarity. This wasn't just about love. This was about dignity. And Esther was done confusing silence with weakness. Vanessa came into Esther's life again the way storms often do, quietly, wrapped in need. After their mother's stroke, Vanessa called crying, saying Lagos was swallowing her, that she needed direction, opportunity, sharpening. Esther didn't hesitate. She arranged the move, cleared the guest room, bought fresh bedsheets, even placed a small flower vase by the window so Vanessa wouldn't feel like a visitor. When Vanessa arrived with one suitcase and gratitude heavy in her voice, Esther felt something close to pride. This was what older sisters were meant to do, lift the younger ones until they could stand. At first, Vanessa played the role perfectly. She woke early, dressed neatly, thanked Esther for everything. She asked Connell respectful questions about work, listened attentively when he spoke, laughed at his jokes a little too eagerly, but Esther didn't notice that part yet. She was busy being generous. She found Vanessa a small job through a church contact, stocked her mini fridge, took her shopping for dresses that looked like confidence without shouting. She warned Connell gently, almost joking, "Please, don't joke with my sister. Lagos can confuse anybody." Connell laughed and promised her nothing would ever cross a line. For a while, the house felt fuller in a good way. Laughter returned. Meals were louder. Esther enjoyed coming home to someone who asked how her day went. Vanessa listened when Esther spoke about her struggles, nodded sympathetically when Esther mentioned the clinic visits. She hugged her tightly after church prayers, whispering, "God will do it for you." And Esther believed her. But familiarity has a way of loosening respect. Vanessa stopped calling her auntie and began using her name casually, confidently, like a peer. She lingered longer in shared spaces, stretched out on the couch as though it belonged to her. She borrowed clothes without asking. She learned Connell's routines quickly, what time he liked dinner, what annoyed him, what made him laugh. Esther noticed, but brushed it aside. She told herself closeness was normal. She told herself she was being paranoid. Then the house began to change in small, uncomfortable ways. Vanessa's perfume started appearing in hallways she hadn't walked through. Connell began buying groceries Esther hadn't listed. Conversations grew shorter when Esther entered a room, like a curtain dropping too quickly. Vanessa stayed up late more often, laughing softly on her phone, sometimes emerging from the guest room in the morning looking rested in a way sleep alone couldn't explain. Esther noticed the glow, the confidence settling into Vanessa's posture, the way she dressed differently, leggings tighter, tops lower, attention sharpened. Connell also changed. He stayed out later. His phone became an extension of his hand. When Esther asked simple questions, he answered vaguely, with irritation masked as tiredness. And when Esther felt that familiar tightening in her chest, the warning women feel before truth fully arrives, she prayed harder instead of asking harder questions. Vanessa became comfortable enough to speak boldly. She joked about marriage in ways that felt too informed. She spoke about men and loyalty with an edge Esther didn't recognize. Once, while folding laundry together, Vanessa laughed and said, "Some men just want what feels alive." Esther smiled weakly, not knowing why the comment lingered uncomfortably in her mind. What Esther didn't know then was that Vanessa wasn't just living in her home. She was studying it. Studying Esther's patience. Connell's weaknesses. The spaces where Esther chose peace over confrontation. Vanessa wasn't just a sister staying temporarily, she was learning how to replace her. By the time Esther began to feel like a guest in her own house, Vanessa no longer felt like one at all. And Esther, still clinging to the belief that love protected loyalty, didn't realize that the very kindness she offered freely had become the doorway through which betrayal walked in, unpacked, and made itself comfortable. At first, Esther noticed the signs the way women always do, without wanting to admit what they mean. Not as accusations, but as disturbances in rhythm. Things that didn't fit, yet refused to go away. Vanessa's perfume lingered in corners of the house where Esther knew she hadn't walked. Not on the couch, not in the living room, but near the hallway leading to the bedroom, near the staircase, near places that held intimacy. Esther told herself scent travels, that houses trap smells, that she was imagining things. Then Connell started coming home with groceries Esther hadn't asked for. Items she didn't cook with. Snacks she didn't eat. Things that felt thoughtful, deliberate, just not for her. When she asked casually, Connell waved it off. Just trying something new. His tone was light, but his eyes avoided hers. Esther laughed it away, embarrassed by her own suspicion. She reminded herself that marriage wasn't a crime scene, that not every inconsistency meant betrayal. The house also developed a new habit of silence. Late at night, Esther would hear soft voices, whispers that stopped the moment she entered a room. Not hurried enough to sound guilty, not slow enough to feel innocent. Vanessa and Connell began sharing jokes Esther wasn't part of. Inside references she didn't understand. When Esther asked what they were laughing about, Vanessa would smile sweetly and say, "Nothing serious," while Connell reached for his phone like a shield. Some mornings, Vanessa came out of the guest room looking complete. Hair neat, skin glowing, clothes already chosen with intention. Not the soft, rumpled look of someone who had just slept, but the composed look of someone who had been seen. Esther noticed it and felt foolish for noticing. She told herself youth looked different. Confidence looked different. That not everything was about her. But then there were Connell's eyes. Esther caught them more than once, lingering too long on Vanessa's waist, following her movements unconsciously, softening in ways Esther hadn't seen in years. And each time Esther noticed, Connell snapped his gaze away too quickly, like a child caught reaching for something forbidden. He became defensive when Esther asked harmless questions. "Why are you watching me like that?" he snapped once. Esther apologized immediately, ashamed of her instincts. The quiet alarms grew louder, but Esther pressed them down. She told herself she was tired. That repeated miscarriages had made her sensitive. That grief had made her suspicious. She wondered if bitterness had crept into her heart without her noticing. She doubled her prayers. She fasted longer. She told God to cleanse her thoughts. She reminded herself that accusing a husband without proof could destroy a home faster than any affair. So she protected peace. She smiled through discomfort. She swallowed questions. She chose spiritual discipline over confrontation. And while Esther prayed, betrayal found oxygen. It learned the house's rhythms. It learned when Esther was asleep. It learned when Connell was restless. It learned that silence could be mistaken for permission. There were moments, small, sharp moments, when Esther almost spoke. When she almost asked Vanessa why she was always around Connell. When she almost asked Connell why his touch had grown distant. When she almost demanded clarity instead of comfort. But each time, fear held her back. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being labeled insecure. Fear of hearing an answer she wasn't ready to survive. So she waited. She watched. And without realizing it, Esther crossed a quiet line from a woman protecting her marriage to a woman gathering information. Not with suspicion, but with attention. She began to remember dates, notice patterns, observe reactions. The signs she once dismissed began arranging themselves into something undeniable. By the time Esther stopped questioning her intuition, the truth was already moving freely through her home, unbothered, confident, breathing where peace used to live. Tuesday arrived without warning, dressed like every other day that pretends to be harmless. Esther left the clinic with a polite smile fixed on her face, the doctor's words still echoing in her chest. "We will keep trying." She nodded, thanked him, walked out, and sat in her car longer than necessary, gripping the steering wheel until the disappointment settled into something manageable. She didn't call Connell. She didn't call anyone. Some pains felt safer when carried alone. She got home earlier than planned, the sun still high, the compound unusually still. The gate opened smoothly. The house greeted her with silence, so complete it felt intentional. No television murmuring in the background. No radio. No music drifting from Vanessa's room. Just stillness. And the warm glow of the bedside lamp spilling into the hallway like a door left slightly open. Esther paused. She called Connell's name once, casually, the way wives do when they don't want to seem suspicious. No answer. She called again, louder. Nothing. Then she called Vanessa's name. The sound dissolved into the quiet without response. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. The kind that doesn't need proof to feel heavy. And then she heard it. Vanessa's laugh. Not the open laugh she used in the living room. Not the playful one she used on the phone with friends. This one was low, intimate, softened by closeness. The laugh of someone who felt chosen. Esther stood still as it drifted down the hallway, followed by a murmur she couldn't quite hear, then another laugh, quieter this time, almost private. Her heart didn't race. It sank. Esther moved toward the sound slowly, as if the house itself were thick with resistance. Each step felt deliberate, heavy, final. She didn't rush. She didn't stop. She passed the guest room, the bathroom, the framed wedding photos lining the wall, images of promises that suddenly felt like evidence. The warm light from the bedroom grew brighter as she approached, softening the hallway in a way that felt cruel. She stood outside the bedroom door for a moment, her hand hovering near the handle. There was no pounding of blood in her ears, no dramatic collapse. Just a quiet, settling certainty. Whatever she was about to see had already been happening for a while. She understood that now. When she pushed the door open, the scene that met her wasn't messy or frantic. There were no hurried movements, no startled reactions. What she saw was comfort. Connell stood close to Vanessa, his posture relaxed, familiar. His hand rested on her belly, not tentatively, not accidentally, but with possession. Vanessa leaned into him naturally, her body angled the way wives do when they belong. The bed behind them was neatly made, the room warm, the air heavy with perfume and something unspoken. They turned toward her together. Connell's expression wasn't panic. It was irritation, as if Esther had interrupted something routine. Vanessa didn't even step back. She smiled slowly, confidently, one hand still resting over Connell's. The curve of her stomach was unmistakable, rounded, undeniable, too far along for denial to exist. Esther's gaze went there first, the way it always does. Not because she wanted it to, but because pain knows exactly where to look. The years of prayers, the empty ultrasounds, the careful hope. All of it collided with that single curve in one quiet, brutal moment. The room stayed silent. No one rushed to explain. No one apologized. That, more than anything, told Esther the truth. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake caught too early. This was a conclusion they had already accepted. Esther's mouth opened, and the words that came out sounded almost polite, almost detached, as if spoken by someone watching her life from outside her body. "Vanessa, what is this?" The question hung in the air, fragile and final. Connell didn't move when Esther spoke. He stayed where he was, close to Vanessa, his hand still resting on her belly, like it had earned the right to be there. Not startled, not ashamed, just settled. Vanessa leaned into him easily, confidently, as though Esther had walked into a room that already belonged to someone else. The curve of her stomach was impossible to ignore, rounded, certain, far past denial. No trembling hands, no guilt in her eyes, just ownership. Esther felt the pain go straight there. Married women always know where betrayal lands hardest. Not in the bed, not in the lies, in the body, in the place where hope once lived. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was practiced. Vanessa broke it first. She smiled slowly, carefully, the way people do when they believe they are in control. "Don't shout, Esther," she said gently, her tone calm, almost caring. "You'll raise your BP." It was the voice of someone pretending concern while enjoying power. The voice of someone already rewriting the story. Connell sighed beside her, a small sound of irritation, as if Esther's presence was inconvenient. That sigh told Esther everything. This wasn't a confession caught too early. This was something that had been discussed, agreed on, normalized between them. Esther swallowed. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. "How long?" she asked. The question came out softer than she expected, thin and careful, as though volume might shatter what little dignity she had left. Vanessa's eyes flicked, just for a moment, to Esther's stomach. Flat, empty, scarred by years of prayers that never stayed. Then she looked back up, calm and cruel, and answered, "Long enough." She stepped slightly closer to Connell, pressing her belly forward without touching Esther. "Long enough to give him what you couldn't." The words landed cleanly.
No shouting, no anger.
Just precision. Esther felt something tear, not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet place that had already been wounded too many times. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation dressed as truth. Vanessa wasn't only claiming Connell. She was claiming superiority, using pregnancy, not as life, but as leverage. Connell finally spoke, his voice edged with annoyance. "Esther, calm down. You're acting dramatic."
Dramatic.
The word cut deeper than the confession. It dismissed pain. It framed Esther as the problem. It told Vanessa she had permission. Esther looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for regret, for shame, for anything human. She found none. His eyes were distant, almost relieved, like a man who no longer had to pretend. Vanessa smiled again, encouraged. "He loves me," she said simply. Then she added, softer, deadlier, "And I'm carrying his child." In that moment, pregnancy stopped being news. It stopped being life. It became a weapon.
A badge.
A threat. It stood between Esther and everything she had believed her marriage was built on. Vanessa wore it proudly. Connell stood behind it. Esther felt tears gather but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. She had already been reduced enough. She breathed in slowly, steadying herself, unaware that somewhere inside her, something had shifted. Something quiet had gone still. The part of her that begged. The part that hoped for mercy. And if you think this is where Esther breaks, where she screams or begs or collapses, you need to stay with this story. Because what she does next will change everything. If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done in Esther's place? Vanessa didn't stop after saying it. She let the words settle, then took another step, closer to Connell, closer to power. She tightened her grip on his shirt as if reminding him who was standing where, then turned her face up to his with a calm that felt rehearsed. There was no tremor in her voice, no uncertainty in her posture. She had crossed from confession into command. "Choose me," she said clearly. Not loud, not rushed. Certain. Tell her to leave this house. The room seemed to contract around the sentence. Esther felt it before she understood it, a cold, stunned pause, like breath being stolen mid-inhale.
Ordered.
The word echoed without being spoken. Ordered, the way you move furniture. The way you remove something that no longer fits. Connell didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Esther, then at Vanessa's belly, then back at Esther again. The hesitation wasn't tenderness.
It was math.
He was weighing outcomes, not feelings. Calculating optics. Choosing the path that cost him the least. Vanessa waited, unbothered. She already believed she'd won. Connell cleared his throat. Esther, maybe it's best you take some space, he began, his tone measured, managerial. You've been under a lot of stress. Vanessa is pregnant. We need peace right now.
Peace.
The word landed like a lie wrapped in virtue, as if Esther's presence was the disturbance, as if betrayal needed accommodation and loyalty needed removal, as if her pain was inconvenient. Esther stared at him, the man she had prayed with, fasted with, built a life with. She saw it then, clearly, without haze or hope. Connell enjoyed her goodness because it required nothing from him. He enjoyed her patience because it shielded him from consequence. And now he resented her pain because it reminded him of promises he hadn't kept. Vanessa's mouth curved into a small, satisfied smile. This was the moment she wanted. Not the pregnancy reveal. Not the confession. This, the public choice. The proof that she could move Esther with words. Just for a while, Connell added, softer now, as if gentleness could soften cruelty. Let things cool down. Esther felt her body react before her mind caught up. A single step backward. Not retreat, distance. Her heart was pounding, but her face was still. She understood the game they were playing. If she cried, she would look unstable. If she shouted, she would become the problem they needed her to be. They were waiting for her to beg. Waiting to feel justified. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, emboldened. It's not personal, she said, falsely kind. It's just reality. You can't expect him to ignore his child. Esther's eyes moved to Vanessa's hand, still gripping Connell like ownership. She saw the hunger there, not for love, but for elevation. Vanessa didn't just want Connell. She wanted Esther displaced.
Witnessed.
Reduced. And suddenly, something inside Esther went very still. She realized this wasn't a misunderstanding to resolve or a marriage to save. This was a power grab. A test. And both of them believed she would fold because folding had always kept the peace before. They were wrong. Esther straightened. Her hands stopped trembling. The ache in her chest didn't disappear, but it settled into something firmer. Resolve. She looked at Connell, then at Vanessa, and for the first time since she walked into the room, she saw them not as husband and sister, but as people who had underestimated her. You want me to leave? She asked quietly. Vanessa lifted her chin.
Yes.
Because you're not the woman he needs anymore. Esther nodded slowly, as if accepting it. The acceptance confused them. It wasn't what they'd prepared for. Betrayers expect noise. They expect collapse. They don't know what to do with calm. Esther reached for her handbag, not in anger, not in defeat, but with intention. And as her fingers closed around what was inside, Connell felt it, a shift he couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. This wasn't over. It was just no longer in their control. Esther took one slow step back. Not away from them, away from the version of herself they thought they were dealing with. Her face didn't harden with rage. It cooled. The kind of calm that settles when a decision has already been made. She reached for her handbag resting on the chair, her movements unhurried, deliberate, as though she had all the time in the world. Vanessa watched with thinly veiled amusement. When Esther pulled out a thick envelope, vanilla-colored, slightly worn at the edges, Vanessa laughed softly. Not nervous. Not confused. Amused. The laugh of someone who believes the end has already been written. Go ahead, Vanessa said lightly. If those are divorce papers, sign quickly so you can go. Let's not drag this. Connell didn't smile, but he didn't stop her either. He stood there, arms loose at his sides, already imagining the next phase of his life. The quiet house, the new beginning, the story he would tell people about how things just didn't work out. Esther didn't look at Vanessa. She didn't open the envelope. She didn't rush to defend herself. Instead, she turned her eyes to Connell and asked one question. Her voice was soft, almost gentle. Have you told her about the house? The effect was immediate. Connell stiffened. Not visibly, not enough for someone unfamiliar with him to notice, but Esther saw it.
His jaw tightened.
His Adam's apple bobbed once. The room shifted in a way Vanessa didn't yet understand. The house. Vanessa repeated, her laughter trailing off. What house? Esther glanced around slowly, taking in the bedroom, the bed, the walls, the polished floors, the windows Vanessa had already imagined redecorating. Then she looked back at her sister, her eyes steady. This house, she said calmly, is not in Connell's name. Silence rushed in. Connell opened his mouth, then closed it again. Vanessa's smile faltered, just slightly, like a crack in glass. What are you talking about? She asked too quickly. Esther walked forward and placed the envelope on the bed between them. Not thrown, not slammed,
Placed.
The sound it made against the mattress was soft but final. The deed has always been in my name, Esther continued, her voice even. My late father's land in Abaddon, the one you all mocked me for keeping, was what I used as collateral. Connell's business was still ideas and promises then. I paid the deposit. I signed the papers. I kept the receipts. Vanessa stared at her, blinking rapidly, trying to process words she hadn't prepared for. Her hand slid slowly off Connell's shirt.
Connell finally stepped forward.
Esther, don't do this here, he said quietly. Not angry. Afraid. The confidence he'd worn minutes earlier drained from his face like color from fabric. Esther turned to him, her eyes wet now, but sharp. You ordered me to leave, she said, her voice trembling just enough to remind him she was human. You told me to take space. But you didn't ask yourself why I've been quiet in this marriage. She opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies, property documents, bank statements, printouts of emails. Vanessa leaned forward, her breath shallow. Connell froze. You thought my silence meant ignorance, Esther said. It didn't. It meant I was paying attention. She lifted one document slightly, just enough for Connell to recognize it, the email thread. His face drained completely.
He knew that one.
The account transfers. The forged signature. The plan he thought she would never uncover. Vanessa looked from Connell to Esther, panic finally surfacing. What is she talking about? She whispered. Esther's voice softened. The baby is innocent, she said, and for the first time her composure cracked. But you used my pain as a weapon. And you, she looked at Connell, used my trust as cover. No one spoke. The room filled with a different kind of silence. Not fear, not chaos, not shouting, but the unmistakable sound of power changing hands. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that simply settles, heavy and irreversible. Esther closed the envelope and left it on the bed, right where Vanessa had imagined her future. And in that moment, Connell understood something too late. This was never about who was pregnant. It was about who owned the ground they were standing on. Esther didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult either of them. She simply stood there and named the truth the way surgeons name organs, precise, necessary, without drama. She spoke about the betrayal as what it was, not as a fight to be won, but as damage already done. Every word landed cleanly, and with each sentence, Vanessa's confidence shrank. Then Esther said it. I already called my lawyer, and I already called our mother. The air broke. Vanessa's body reacted before her mind did. Her hand flew instinctively to her belly, her eyes widening as if the ground beneath her had shifted. The arrogance drained from her face so fast it was almost embarrassing to watch. What? She whispered, her voice suddenly small. Why would you call her? Connell stepped forward immediately, panic masked as authority. Esther, let's not escalate this, he said, holding his palms out as if he could still manage the moment. We can talk about this calmly. Lawyers don't need to be involved. Family doesn't need to be involved. Esther looked at him, then really looked, and felt nothing soften. You involved family the moment you climbed into my marriage through my sister's body, she said quietly. Vanessa shook her head, her voice breaking. Esther, please. I didn't plan it like this. It just happened. Esther didn't flinch. You planned enough to order him to throw me out, she replied. You planned enough to use my womb against me. You planned enough to smile. Vanessa reached for her, desperation replacing pride.
Please.
Don't do this. Think about the baby. The baby is innocent, Esther said, her voice cracking for the first time. But innocence doesn't erase accountability. Connell tried again, his tone sharpening. You're being emotional. Let's all calm down. You don't have to leave. No one is forcing you. Esther laughed once, quiet, bitter. You already did. She explained then, calmly, how she had been quiet not because she didn't see what was happening, but because she was preparing. How she had noticed the changes, the money shifts, the secrets. How silence had given her room to observe instead of react. She told them she would not be made homeless in her own life, emotionally, financially, or spiritually. I won't beg, she said. I won't compete. And I won't stay where I'm being erased. Vanessa slid down onto the edge of the bed, shaking, clutching her stomach like a shield. Connell stood frozen, the authority he'd worn earlier now stripped away. For the first time, he looked unsure of himself. For the first time, he understood he was no longer in control. Esther picked up her handbag. The house felt different as she moved toward the door. Not like something she was losing, but like something that had already closed around them. The walls that once felt like stability now felt like witnesses. The bedroom that had looked like victory moments earlier now felt exposed, temporary, unsafe. At the doorway, Esther paused and turned back once. You can keep each other, she said softly, but you will not keep my peace. She walked out without slamming the door, and as her footsteps faded down the hallway, Connell felt it fully, the weight of what he had misjudged. Esther's peace had never been weakness. It had been discipline, strategy, control. And now that she had withdrawn it, the house felt less like a prize and more like a trap slowly closing in. Esther stopped at the doorway. Not because she had forgotten something. Not because she was unsure. But because some truths are meant to be delivered last, when there is no room left to argue with them. She turned slowly, her hand still resting on the doorframe, and looked back at the two people standing in the wreckage of what they thought was victory. Vanessa was shaking now, her earlier confidence completely gone. Connell stood rigid, his eyes darting between them, already calculating damage, already afraid of what he couldn't see coming. Esther's voice was low when she spoke again.
Calm.
Controlled.
There's one more thing, she said.
They both looked at her. You didn't just get my sister pregnant, Esther continued. You got the wrong woman's sister pregnant. Connell frowned, slightly confused. Vanessa's brows pulled together. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice thin. Esther didn't answer immediately. She stepped fully back into the room, just enough to reclaim the space with her presence. Then she looked directly at Vanessa, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something far more unsettling. Did you really think I didn't know? Esther asked quietly. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. For months, Esther went on. You sent messages, screenshots, voice notes, timelines. Sometimes without realizing it. Sometimes because you wanted to feel powerful. Sometimes because you wanted to be admired.
She paused.
Every time you complained about Connell. Every time you bragged. Every time you slipped. Vanessa's face drained of color. That's not true, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Esther reached into her bag again. But this time, she didn't pull anything out.
She didn't need to.
The truth was already doing its work. The sister you thought you were betraying me with, Esther said softly, has been telling me everything. The room went completely still. Connell's breath caught. What? He said sharply, turning to Vanessa. What is she talking about? Vanessa shook her head frantically.
No.
No, she's lying. She's trying to turn you against me. Esther watched them carefully, noting the cracks widening, the panic blooming. You don't even know how much I have, she said. And that's the problem. You assumed silence meant emptiness. You assumed I wasn't paying attention. She stepped back again, reclaiming the door. You don't know who I've told, Esther continued. You don't know what's already been backed up. You don't know what my lawyer has seen. And you don't know how our mother will respond when she arrives. Vanessa let out a broken sound, half sob, half gasp. Esther, please, she begged. I swear, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Esther's expression softened just slightly. Not with forgiveness, but with finality.
It always goes this far, she said.
People just don't think about consequences when they believe they're winning. Connell took a step toward Esther. We can fix this, he said quickly. Whatever you think you know, we can talk. Please, don't do anything rash. Esther met his eyes one last time. I already did, she replied. I chose myself. She opened the door. Behind her, the room filled with the sound of unraveling. Vanessa crying openly now, Connell pacing, both of them realizing too late that the ground beneath them was no longer solid. They didn't know what evidence existed, what conversations had already happened, what would come next. The uncertainty was the punishment. Esther walked down the hallway slowly, her footsteps steady, unhurried. Each step felt lighter than the last. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because she was no longer carrying their weight. By the time she reached the front door, the house behind her felt distant, like a place she had already left emotionally long ago. She stepped outside into the evening air, closed the door gently, and didn't look back. Inside, Connell stood frozen, staring at the door Esther had just walked through, realizing the truth with a clarity that hurt more than any accusation. He hadn't destroyed Esther with betrayal. He had destroyed himself by underestimating a quiet woman who finally decided to stop protecting everyone but herself. Esther didn't disappear after that night. She didn't run. She didn't hide. And she didn't crumble the way everyone expected her to. What happened next didn't unfold in screams or chaos, but in consequences. Quiet ones. Legal ones. Family ones. The kind that don't make noise at first until they change everything. Because while Connell and Vanessa were still trapped inside that house, arguing over what Esther might know, Esther was already 3 steps ahead, sitting across from people who deal in facts, documents, and decisions that don't care about excuses. And when their mother finally arrived, let's just say no one in that house was prepared for which daughter she believed. Part 2 is where the real reckoning begins. The questions Connell is avoiding. The evidence Vanessa didn't realize she left behind. The choice Esther makes that no one sees coming, especially the people who thought they broke her. So here's what I need from you. Do you think Connell will try to fight Esther legally, or beg when he realizes he's already lost? Do you think Vanessa truly loved Connell, or was pregnancy just a weapon? And most importantly, if you were Esther, would you expose everything publicly, or walk away quietly and let karma finish the job? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what you would do next. If this story hit close to home, like the video. If you don't want to miss part 2, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what's coming next will change how you see betrayal, family, and quiet women forever. Part 2 is coming very soon.